about Yigal. Well, we met in India, actually, when I was doing my great cannibal hunting that I'll publish about one day. Yigal will be in the first book, actually, in that series. It's a true story. And so I was up in a place near Rishikesh called Lakshman Jula. And I used to stay at guest houses with Israelis in particular because I liked Israelis. I got to know a lot of Israelis, and we started staying in the same guest houses, and it was just very interesting. And then one morning, a young Israeli named Ori Yelinek accidentally, he was crossing the Ganges River on an inner tube, and he drowned. And so I was looking for him for quite a while, several days. And then Yigal, he's quite a figure. He's more than just an author. He's something much more than that. He's a complex man. So he was dispatched basically to help with a search team to help find Ori, because Yigal had searched for missing Israelis before, and he knew India quite well. And so that's when I met Yigal, it's an incredible story. And so the next thing you know, we became friends, and we've stayed in contact over the years. And Yigal, actually, we've met in Thailand as well. And I read one of his fiction books called Death in Shangri-La. Normally, I don't read fiction, but since Yigal wrote it, I read it because I know what a serious individual he is. And it's very interesting. It rang true. It was a fiction story set in India. And he's just come out with another book, which I haven't read because I'm so focused on this pandemic. And anyway, I called up Yigal in Tel Aviv to ask him what's going on. First of all, what's going on in Israel, which I'm very interested in. I'm a huge supporter of Israel, and I want to know how his books are doing. Yigal, take it away.
You just forgot one thing, that I was before you in Iraq. If you remember correctly.
That's right.
I was with the signals, one of the signal teams units. Was in Desert Storm too. I was the only Israeli embedded journalist for 52 days in Iraq. So I was there too. You spend more time over there, but I spent about 52 days in Iraq and another 10 days in Kuwait. But, another period of life. Now back to Israel. I tell you like this, for me, it's I would say the weird, funny time, because, Corona is outside, but I'm so used to be indoors sometimes, or I'm extremely outside on sort of a mission,
well, you're
journalist
very
mission,
athletic.
writing.
You're super athletic too. You're like an animal.
Yeah. I'm still a wild, on the wild side of the humanity, I would say. I'm ready to go anytime. I need a telephone and say to me, just be in the airport. But unfortunately now, airports are closing down in Israel as well. I mean, there's the commercials, but there are no passengers. So I'm really anxious. I would say I would love to go now to places like China, India, and really check out what's really happening. Not what on the, I would say, on the media, but check what people are feeling, what's happening in remote places, and see what the situation with people is, not what we are being told, but really to check for myself. And, we like to do it independently. We like to see it in our own eyes and not to... it's the same in Israel. I've been basically, when I came back just on beginning of mid-March, I came from Cuba. I came on the last flight with British Airways. Basically took me 48 hours to come from Cuba, and that was the time Cuba started to see corona epidemic, and there were 3 Spanish and 1 Cuban, and I said, well, Cuba is a nice place, but not to stay when everyone is sick around, because they have amazing, I would say, doctors and nurses, but they have 0 facilities. So they're very good in exporting doctor to all over the third world, but they cannot take care of Cuba itself. So I came over here. I stayed at my, what you see around me is my, my working. This is my bicycles.
I love your library.
So it's a
Look at that.
300. Yeah. It's all. I mean, you see, this is all my library. This is my working room, and basically, I have a lot of books. I have a lot. You see, all around. They are on piles on the floors. I all the time change. I still get a lot of books. I read a lot. I enjoy
I can tell every
So,
time we talk, I can tell you read a lot. You've probably read every one of those books. That's why you're such a joy to talk with about so many different things.
Yeah. So basically, I stayed on the floor. Now you cannot see my mattress because my wife said, "Oh, Yigal, 14 days and 40 days." So I stayed in my room in isolation for 14 days, going to the toilet. I had the best service, room service for my room.
Your wife is
And,
making you stay in your library? Your wife make you stay in your library?
It was amazing, but honest, I could not write a word. It took me time, to come back to myself, like I guess everyone else, to create sort of routine. But so I have a roof outside of me, so I was jogging on my inside steps like for 1 hour, 18 steps up, 18 steps down. And after, Israel got into a complete isolation. So basically, I stayed at home more than 1 month, which was fine. I'm used to. Sometimes, I get to work in my room, so I don't go out. And then I go 180%, and then I take my bag and I fly, and then I forgot everything. So basically, for me, personally, I'm not the type of, get up, take a shot of espresso, check my mobile, and down to my car. I have a quite different style of life. So for me, it was not completely change or shock or I didn't have the tense or the tension most people have, because, okay, now I'm in, now I'm out. I've been living like this most of my life.
You seem like
I
every
started
time
writing.
you always seem like you have good control over your mind. For instance, in India, it was very stressful, and you were just calm. You were just like, no problem, don't worry, we're gonna do everything. You were in charge. Everything's easy, and
Mike,
your
I
mind
tell
is your mind is calm, I think.
I think it's a lot of experience because, in my life, we're passing so many different and extreme situations that basically I would say self-control and a smile solve a lot of things. So I rather control and read the subject, of situation,
Right.
because I've been visiting a lot of Arab countries. I have another passport beside Israel. So many times people think, even here, and lately, I was in the States where I published my book, and everybody come to me and say, Yigal, are you a Mossad? I said, no, really, I'm not. I'm a journalist.
That's the
So
first thing
everyone
that
is
crossed
weak.
my mind.
I know. I can tell you the one time I crossed from Thailand to Myanmar, to Burma. And this time, I don't remember if you remember the name of Kunsa. He was like Escobar. He was the biggest lord of drugs in Thailand, north of Thailand, the Golden Triangle,
Right.
and in Myanmar, in Burma. And I crossed over illegally to meet him. And then the first question, through an translator, interpreter, is asking me, Moshe Dayan? I said, no, I'm too young for this. Moshe Dayan, was the Minister of Defense, a very famous fighter. By the way, he was the only one beside me who was embedded as journalist with the American, but he came not really as journalist. He was in Vietnam. So the second question is, are you Mossad? And this time I said, yes, of course, because I was aware, preserving my skin. So I said, yes, of course. And I spent there, on it was Irrawaddy or the Salwen, where Kunsa army, he had in this time about 30,000.
Those are two rivers, by the way, for
soldiers.
people that don't know, the Irrawaddy and Salween River.
I use this character in my second book, which came just now, Passport to Death, which is based in Bangkok, and it's around a drug deal who goes wrong, and Israeli young lady, a young girl who disappeared. So I use this atmosphere. I remembered, from all these years in Bangkok, dark side of Bangkok, I would say, not one most touristy, the sandy beaches and palm trees. You know them better than me. So this is Passport to Death, which came just last November. And the first one, Death in Shangri-La, was based partly on what we passed in India. Basically, again, sort of a search for a guy who go for a monastery, and he doesn't want to keep contact with his father in Israel, and he say his father is an arm dealer. So this is, I all the time choose, sort of, I would say the dark side of not the Israeli soul, but the Israeli behavior. Sometimes Israelis, not only Israelis, but, I know better Israelis, like to think that the other places beside Israel is sort of a playground where they can do whatever they want. And of course, it's not.
Yeah. Actually, specifically, yeah. See, that's an interesting. I got your book cover up there now, Death and Shangri. I read this book. It's a very good book. It's a fiction book. I almost never read fiction, but I read this because Yigal he's a very interesting man, and it rang true of the things I know about India. But what Yigal just said, I'll translate, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Not that you need a translator, but that Americans do the same thing. We go to other countries and play like it's just a big playground, and like there's no penalty for making mistakes, and there's huge penalties for making mistakes, often much bigger penalties in other countries, because you're not in a safe place all the time, and everything goes, and that's one of the subjects of Death in Shangri-La.
I will add like this, that one of the things that I'm much more careful these days, because I'm not a journalist in Israel. I mean, I write in Israel, but most of my missions are in really fucked up places. So the situation for journalists like me became from bad to worse in the last few years. So now every time, like 2 years, or I would say last year, I get a phone call from my TV channel and say, what about going to south of Lebanon and do something about the Hezbollah? I said, because nowadays with Facebook, with Instagram, with they can, it's very easy to see us who we are really. Is not. I think that even secret services like Mossad are facing the same problems. So
facial recognition has been a great changed the whole world.
Exactly. So basically, journalists and secret agents are facing the same problems now to get to the target and to bring a good story. I prefer to be on the side of bringing a good story. I hope soon we can do it, But I must say, if you're following the news, and you follow the news, there's sort of warming up, I would say, between Israel and Iran, which taking place all the time. And Israel is all the time attacking targets in Syria, signing, very clearly to Iran that guys, you don't have to do nothing near the border. And it's very tricky situation now here because it's happening every, I would say, 2 or 3 days. Targets are bombing near Damascus and other cities, which are, factories to improve the missiles and all things transfer from via Syria to Lebanon to the Hezbollah. So I'm not happy about what's happening. It seems like Corona will stop and we're back to the same, sorry I'm using a not nice word, shitty situation. While on the other side, with Gaza and the occupied territories, we're having sort of, I would say, not blue time, but we have sort of quiet and helping. Israel is helping a lot now at Gaza with the Corona situation, with medication, with mask, with all kind of equipment which they doesn't have. And this is maybe a time, for a change. Maybe it's a time we can use for a change because what can I say? Israel is all the time, even now, is very strong, safe, advanced beside our neighbors, which are behind us. And, it's time maybe that Israel should send a hand, for the areas beside us, which are having much more difficulties with equipment, hospitals, and the situation. And this is done quietly, and I really appreciate, this sort of thing, which we don't talk about a lot, but it's happening. So this is a nice aside, I would say, what happened with the Corona in Israel. Beside this, I miss the sea. I'm going tomorrow to swim again and back to normal.
So Israel is opening back up.
Amazingly quick. That's what I would say. We have very low number of infection. We have very low number of death. I'm not sure what really is the reason, but we saw all this region, Jordan, Oman, Saudi. I'm not sure if they are right in the number, but basically the numbers are very low. And it's quite amazing if you think of Egypt with a huge population. So this is quite surprising. I have no idea what really the reason is. But basically, Israel is opening up. Schools opened yesterday and today, kindergarten today. And if you go to the walk near the beach, everyone from morning to afternoon, not a lot of people got back to work because it's still lagging, the support. We are not like in America, what Bibi Netanyahu is promising down when you go down in the ladder. We didn't get any financial support, so everyone is complaining. But I would say this is very typical Israeli to complain a bit about everything. But
Israelis complain even more than Americans.
I think it's human nature, but on the other side, we are very optimistic.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't see myself coming back to roaming the plains. I hope maybe July, I'm really keen about going to China. If I would say where I want to go first is to see China, go to Wuhan. You want to join me?
Of course I do. You think they'll let me in? They just kicked me out of Hong Kong in February.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I'd already left, and then I went to go back in on February 5th, and then they denied me entry. Right.
They only wanted... Okay. They wanted to say that you should go to the gym a bit and then come back.
Yeah, right. But they didn't let me in, so there you go.
Okay. This is, I think it's fascinating. I'm following what is happening in China. And of course, is a huge story. We are swallowing all of us, but it's fascinating. I mean, I'm not judging now who is right, who is wrong, but I think it's a big lesson, and it's fascinating for us as writers, authors, journalists. I mean, it's like injection in the fluids of a bit of adrenaline to follow a big story like this. I'm sure there will be plenty of books, plenty of movies, Corona, Red Corona, whatever. What do you think?
There'll be 1,000 books come out of this, and there's no question in my mind who's wrong, and that's definitely China. But then there's been a lot of also, let's say imperfect at best responses to the virus. But there's, how this actually got started and the cover up and all that. That's a done deal.
Well, this is China. This is China. It's not the most transparent. It's a complicated place. I spend a lot of time. If I combine all the time, I wrote 2 books about China. I can't say I know China, because it changed so much in the last few years that my generation is, I would say, the cultured or the fucked up from the Cultural Revolution. The intellectuals, they are not the people who control China. So it's like in other places of the world, is the right, the strong people, the people who are not caring about, the benevolence or the simple way of life. This is very different China from the one I met when I came. I was in Tiananmen 3 days after it's happened, by chance, not. And in this time, China was so, in many ways, naive and transparent.
Naive, right.
Naive, yes, it's not the same. I think one of the books will be on the shelves in a year or 2, will be mine as well. I'm like, brooding now and making notes. And if you will see my my table is full of books on China, from philosophy, literature, journeys. I'm trying to think again on China, what I know and what I don't know, and it's a fascinating journey. I hope it will, from my side, I hope it will come out as another thriller, Indotana or adventures, ex-Mossad turning into a private investigator, Dotana O.
Well, all right.
That's
Yigal.
it.
And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I don't even know what time it is in Tel Aviv right now. It's about 2 a.m. here. But
Mike, can I add one funny thing?
Always.
This
yes.
one. Yeah, yes. This is a result of a head card that my 2 boys made to me because, they said, let's have a fun. You look too serious. So that's what came a week ago. Yeah,
that was what I asked you before we started. I was like, what happened to your hair?
Well, in my age, it's first nice to have a hair on the top, but it was sort of, let's get crazy a bit, not just because we created a gym on the roof. So
right.
Part of it, I had to look, my 2 boys are like huge, tattooed, muscular, very green beret guys,
right.
with American. My son was in the SEALs, another one was in so, I had to fit into the society.
So you had to change your look.
Yeah, right.
All right, brother. Great talking with you.
Yeah, and it's so nice talking to you. We should do it more often.
Anytime. Reach me, and I know how to reach you, so I'm sure we're
all the best, and all the best. All the viewers, just helps, the best, the second verb in the Bible, now I'm talking like an Israeli Jew, is A God created, but created in Hebrew, we say bara. But it's the same noun like briut. Briut is health. So I wish health to everyone.
And health to you.
Same. Bye-bye, Mike.
Bye, Yigal.